Hello, pod fans, and welcome to another exciting edition of No Coast Defenders. Just the original trio here today. I'm with Dan and Tim. And big announcement for us: we will be taking a small hiatus. It's just a lot to talk about, and with no MCU, we're just going to take a little bit of a break and come back refreshed for Loki. Dan, did you want to speak on that real quick?
Yeah, I mean, June 9th, we have a solid start date for Loki, unlike Black Widow, which has been pushed how many times? Just kidding there.
On Wednesdays for whatever reason.
Yeah, and I was hoping that we'd have MODOK to talk about, but quite frankly, I don't know if you guys watched it yet, but it's not for me. I love Pat. I thought I would love the show, but it's also not part of the MCU, so it's they did what they did with it, and we went from there. But
I haven't watched it yet because I was reading indie books, so.
Yeah, I just I got 3 episodes in, and I was just
What did you like about it?
I guess it's just not what I want to spend my time on right now.
Yeah.
I get very little time to watch many things, so that just it wasn't bad. If you like Robot Chicken, I think you'll dig it. If you like Pat Oswalt, you'll dig it. But it didn't feel like a MODOK show to me. It felt like just a funny spin on it, I guess. So
yeah,
but yeah, it just wasn't for me. But I'm also, for the folks that follow my channel, I am paring down to just 2 segments per week. The Battle of the Ballads with Mr. Greg here and his lovely brother Joseph, who we had a ghost version of last week, but we will have him back in the flesh this week. And our journey through the MCU with Tim here, and those will be my remaining 2 segments that'll be happening weekly for probably the long run, to be quite honest.
Yeah, Tim, thoughts on a hiatus for us?
Yeah, it's it's much needed. Things are a little slow despite all the news coming out. There's not a ton to touch on really, but yeah, I'm ready to take a small break and get refreshed and have Mr. Hiddleston welcome us back.
Yeah, and I think if you've only listened to the podcast or you're only just tuning to this one and you're looking at the episode count, you're like, these guys have been only going for 3 months. But I think people have to remember we also wrote about WandaVision, which was time consuming in itself to the 3 of us have a written conversation. So yeah, a nice break for a couple weeks will be good. Maybe Dan will come back and love DC after a little bit of a break.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I was actually I'm sure you've heard of the speculation that somehow it got out Disney's buying DC. I don't know where the rumors came from other than somebody sold some stocks, but it's not happening. So I've spent the last 2 days like debunking this and telling friends, no, this isn't the case. And the funny response I've gotten in most of these conversations was, man, I was really hoping DC would finally make a good project. And that was coming from me. That was coming from other people who watch television. So, but yes, I don't know that I'll come back unless Black Adam magically comes out before June 9th. But I am challenging myself to read some DC books, not modern because I looked at the art and it's complete shit, but some old DC books and try to show some love for these characters.
Greg, before we get into today's topic, did you happen to see the Eternals trailer?
I was going to bring that up myself next. So yes, I saw the Eternals trailer, but one key note there, and I think a lot of people are forgetting about, it's a teaser trailer. And I know it's still over 2 minutes, but Marvel's changed because teaser trailers used to be 15 to 20 seconds. But Marvel's changed. Marvel does what it wants, and so it's made 15-second teaser trailers into 2-minute trailers, and this way they can drop a 6-minute trailer on us if they want. But yeah, so I think it's important to remember this is a teaser trailer. I saw a lot of complaining online that we learned nothing, and we're not supposed to. It's a teaser trailer.
Well, that's the point of trailers in the first place. Like we've gotten so accustomed to seeing the whole goddamn movie in the trailer. It's nice to not see anything except Richard Mann saying how he could lead the Avengers. And
I popped for that. It looked beautiful. The dance number they showed clips of, and I already think this movie is going to get panned by a lot of fans simply from that teaser because of the Bollywood influence. And I just don't think it's going to go over with some fans, which is ridiculous because Bollywood films are always delightful. Always delightful.
Um, I think that some of the hate with it seems to also be a lot of people have commented like, I want to see the villain. Well, naturally you do, but the MCU is coming back for a new phase and we know absolutely nothing about it. And they were derailed a bit, so obviously they had to change some things up. Personally, I love the casting in this movie, and I'm saying that simply because I like Kumail Nanjiani. I absolutely love him. Salma Hayek, I'm not a big Angelina Jolie fan, to be honest, but I'm excited to see Kit Harington as Black Knight. I'm excited for the cast. The writers on this staff are some of the best Marvel's had. So I'm excited about that. As a teaser, it did nothing to stimulate me or tease me. It just existed. I think the camera work was pretty cool in it, but I have this running theory that if a trailer has to have an ominous classic song in it, it ends up being a really shitty movie.
So
and
now
if
you altered that from what I saw because you said just ominous earlier on Facebook, and I was like, well, Alien, that's all the trailer is ominous music with nothing but the word alien popping on, and that's one of the greatest sci-fi / monster films of all time. So
yeah, it's there's a trend that the DC films have had where they do that to promote their films and then they're all trash, but it's not just those, it's other like holiday movies. A lot of movies use these songs and then they're hoping that draws everybody in and the whole movie itself actually sucks. With that being said, Marvel hasn't really given us much that has sucked, although as Tim and I have gone through our journey, we found that we like many features much less than we thought we did. I think this is going to be good. People were questioning the Guardians when the Guardians was coming out, like, what the hell is that? And look what happened with that. So they've been working on this project for a lot longer than they worked on other projects, especially having to get panned for a while. I think it's got a lot of potential. I just don't know that it's going to draw the fanboys in because all I'm seeing are comments about Captain America and Tony Stark. Well, that era is done. We're moving on to other areas. So I think there's going to be some sort of fracture for a little bit, but we all know everybody's going to pack the theaters to see these damn movies. I'll be watching on Disney Plus from home because I don't like going anywhere. And people are going to see it, and then they're going to like it, and then it's going to be like, oh, I was wrong. And then they're going to hate on the next one, and it's just the cycle that continues.
On top of that, we're talking about Alien, which is almost 40 years old at this point. So modern cinema hasn't been able to get anything that right.
I just hate blanket anytime statements, and Dan likes to make those.
Not wrong.
I mean, ominous music for a trailer, Alien, and it's a brilliant film. So
I tend to go with ominous classic rock track. If I left that off my previous statement, I need to amend it because that's genuinely what I mean. I made that
previous one said just ominous music, and I was like, well, if you like horror films, all horror films, that's what the trailer is ominous music. So
no, I left out the classic rock part because it's spot on. I don't think I've been wrong yet, to be honest, about any of those films when it comes to the response from the fans and myself.
No, you poured all your hate into your Mephisto theories.
We've already seen him. We've seen him 10 times. He was actually in the Loki trailer.
He was. Yeah, he was. Yep.
Okay. So, did you guys have any other comic book news you wanted to hit up before we started talking some indie titles?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty much the brunt of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's just going to be kind of interesting to see what titles DC moves with their comics right now, given the new distribution and all that stuff they're going with, and also the restructuring of Warner Brothers there, which basically are trying to build Disney Plus, but for them. So you're going to have your HBO Max, your DC, your travel, and your cooking stuff all together, kind of like a Disney Plus platform. I'm just curious to see if that, because they also own DC Comics, so I'm curious to see if that impacts distribution at all, if it impacts marketing, what they're going to pump money into. From what I've been reading, they may actually offer less titles, and as we've seen the last year, they've canceled a bunch of titles that I've seen some DC readers be upset about. So I'm just curious to see where this goes now that they're trying to really pump money to the studio aspect and not so much the printed market. So I think it'll be something to watch in the next 6 months for those who avidly read the DC comics. There's going to be a lot that's going to change.
I mean, they're probably just going to cancel everything except for Batman and just have 14,000 Batman. I mean, they already have too many Batman titles as it is, so
Yeah.
they'll just continue to pump that out, which is unfortunate. I think that's what Marvel does well is draw from the source material. They understand the comic book stories where they're getting the movies, like, and they do twist on them, as you saw with uh, Falcon and Winter Soldier. They took 14 different storylines throughout the Captain America plots and like wove them together. So I think DC's really going to miss out if they cancel it, but who knows? That'll be up to them. I don't read any DC titles currently anyway, so.
Yeah, I just, I've heard from a lot of the readers, since they switched to the Walmart distribution and a lot of the other things, you can't find as many as local comic shops. A lot of local comic shops stopped carrying many of them, especially when they said you had to buy a certain amount and they knew they wouldn't sell them. So it's, they've like flexed nuts this whole time and doubled down on their strategy and just keep getting burned and buried. So they have new management at the helm, and I'm wondering if that's going to help them overall, on the film side, on the comic side, if they may actually finally have a board that comes to their senses with what to do with all of this, because it's clear that they can make money and they're just losing money on it because they have terrible people in charge. So I'm interested more of the business side of it, I guess, but also to see how the fans react.
I just remember when Chuck Dixon was writing both Nightwing and Robin. Those were two of my favorite titles. And DC fired Dixon because he didn't follow Grant Morrison's bizarre Batman storylines. And that was just, well, at the same time, Marvel was doing its writers' retreats yearly where the editors and the main writers would go and talk about future storylines for the next year. And that idea of just writers not being on the same page within the same family, like if you can't get your Batman writers together, there's a problem. Whereas Marvel's like, oh, let's weave our whole universe together so we can do our big crossover this year. And I think that was where you saw the success of the Marvel comic books in that era, whereas DC just started rebooting every year. And honestly, that Grant Morrison stuff, like I know he's a legend, he deserves all like the credit he gets, but I thought his Batman stuff was terrible, and I thought Dixon was doing some of the best like down to earth superhero stuff. And there's reason he was scooped up and given G.I. Joe and like complete creative control over the G.I. Joe titles right away.
Oh yeah.
But I love Chuck Dixon, so
they've moved in mysterious ways. It's interesting when you look at the fact that in the early and mid 90s, Marvel went bankrupt and DC was booming, and now here we are. It's quite interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, but what's on? While they've been on the decline, what's been on the rise? Independence.
Yes.
Hey, segue.
That was a good segue.
Thanks.
Dan, did you want to start us off with an independent?
Say Tim or Dan? Sorry.
Dan,
You.
sorry.
Oh, sorry. I don't want to steal anybody's thunder, but to be honest, I've read the trade twice now, and that's the Department of Truth. I genuinely love it. You got it right there?
Yeah.
My copy is currently at work, unfortunately. I've been asking, you guys have seen, I've been asking for recommendations for months of like new stuff to read, and every single time people say Department of Truth, I'm like, I heard the description of it. I'm like, I don't know if that's for me. And then Chet at Rhino's finally one day, he just put it in my pile. He said, I keep seeing people tell you to read this. And so I took it home and I read it in one sitting, and I was just blown away by it. And I can't wait until the second trade comes out. I'm really not doing single issues much anymore outside of my main characters I collect. So I'm doing a trade edition. And to be completely honest, if I was reading that issue to issue, I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much as I enjoy just being able to plow through it. It's like binging a show, but there's really no sense of what's next. And I love the idea that they take the conspiracies that so many people talk about or believe in or argue about in their daily life and frame a story around it where you can actually see everybody's perspective as if, kind of like how we potentially could as humans, I guess. But then there's legit this Department of Truth who at first you think they're the fact checkers and you find out that they're much more. So I am completely titillated by this title. I am excited about what's to come. It's made me want to pick up more of the indies that are out there right now. Like I just picked up Ice Cream Man Volume 1, and that's also an interesting read. It's one that it took me a while to wrap my mind around because it's a bunch of different stories with like one linking character who can kind of change lives, I guess, if you will. And so it's not a tough read. It's just one where you have to be invested and really wrap your mind around it. And time has been an issue lately for me. So I haven't been able to give it the thorough read I would prefer to give it. But this Department of Truth, and I know the three of us have all read it, right?
I've only gone about an issue and a half into the trade. And frankly, I'm right there with you. I love it to death. I through my family, my family has a couple people who used to be big into conspiracy theories, probably still is. And so this one piqued my interest a little bit more. And the artwork inside it's something. It's a little intense. For those who haven't read it, it's a very loose watercolor style with a lot of artistic like scratching and like redaction like they would have on like government files, and just a lot of rigid pencil work, and it's really beautiful, but it is intense.
I had no idea that this was from the same guy who did Something's Killing the Children too, which
Really?
I had planned to read because of all the hype around it, but typically when something has that much hype, I tend to stay away for a while. But I also learned today that this run is also getting a TV show. So
Wow.
apparently a lot more people enjoyed it than I had known, and I feel dumb for sitting out this long, but I also am happy I waited because I got a full trade out of it.
Yeah, and I don't think this really works as well issue to issue because of how different the narrative is, and it seems to flip the story on its head multiple times in issues. So I think it worked really well as a trade. Tim mentioned like the loose watercolor artwork. I'm not a huge fan of the artwork, but it works for the story. So it didn't take me as out as it would have if the story was a little more happy-go-lucky and upbeat than it is. But I almost didn't pick this up just because James Tynion, he had wrote the Joker War, which was terrible. We had Buck on last week, and he told me to pick it up, and I had to tell him I didn't like it, but he'd recommended something else in that same exchange that I really enjoyed. So he was batting 500 in there, I guess. So not a terrible batting average for Buck, who actually is way over that anyway. But I didn't like the Joker War at all. So I know Tim had mentioned he was reading this one last week in his recommendations, and I was considering it. And then when I asked the woman working at the comic book shop what she recommended for an independent trade, this was like the first thing that jumped out in her mind. So I had it in my hand, and then I put it down because I'm like, I've read him before and I didn't like it. I'm glad I picked it up. I'm glad I stuck with it. Definitely going to be picking up the rest of the trades from here on out for that one.
You know, when you mentioned the artwork, I remember I opened it up and I was like, but then I got like 4 pages in and I was like, all right, cool, I'm in. Because the issue and what I've been telling people, with looking for new recommendations is I have not been enjoying the artwork in the modern Marvel books, like really any of them. So that's been a big challenge for me because if I'm not liking what I'm looking at, then it's really hard for me to enjoy what I'm reading. Like the new the Thor series that everybody seems to love, I can't stand the art in it. So it's been making it a bit difficult for me to actually read them, which is why I actually quit overall. I just want somebody to read it to me at this point or listen to it on audio because it just didn't work for me visually. So this is one of the rare ones where the story is so good that I'm not the least bit upset about the art.
Yeah, my problem with a lot of the modern art is I kind of just like a standard characters with a background in word bubbles art. So when they start getting too funky and out there, like I'm awesome they can do that. Awesome, there's a market for it. It's just not for me.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Department of Truth sometimes. It is because of the really stylized look to it. It is hard to differentiate some characters or even kind of figure out. It takes you an extra second to figure out what's going on in certain panels. But it's a good thing the story's good, because that definitely makes up for it in spades.
Now, I also something that I was kind of raving about that was from Boom was Berserker, the Keanu Reeves run that's out, and I really enjoyed that. Oh wait, Greg, did you have one? I don't want to steal all the time here.
We're gonna play Marry Date Chill before I get into mine. So go ahead, go for it.
So Berserker, I was really pumped about it. It seemed very different. When I read the first issue going through it, it was actually like watching a Keanu Reeves movie, which was kind of cool. Like frame by frame, that's just what it was. It was like watching John Wick or something like that. But then I got to issue 2 and I realized that they were out of creative juices. So I'm glad it's a limited series, because it's issue 2 fell completely flat. And I'm fine if every panel is just people shooting in a different way. But I'm not big on the story in issue 2, to be honest. I will continue buying the single issues because of the nice foil covers. And I like how the cardstock on it. And to be quite honest, I know many people who can't find them. So if I'm able to just give it to them because they couldn't find it, then I'm cool with that, because they do sell out so quick. But that's one that I was really excited about. And now I'm not so keen on, simply because of the night and day between issue 1 and 2. And I'm not alone in this from what I've been gathering. I asked some other people I know who were reading it, and they were super excited to get issue 2, and they kind of felt the same way. So it's a bummer. I do look forward to the series when it comes out, and then probably the movie, and then the toy line, and the pop line, and everything else. But sadly, reading wise, I don't think I'll be pursuing it any further.
And before Greg, we get into yours, because it sounds like yours is kind of a pretty big hot take if you're connecting it with Date Marry Chill from the sound of it. I haven't had much history with independents. I'm like Dan. I've just started to get back into them, and pick up some more recommendations. Unfortunately, mine won't be here until now to like September, because I am just going for trades, and I wanted to snatch up as many titles as I could. So the ones that I have on my docket, I'll just run down the list real quick. I have Arrow. While it is a Marvel property, I think she's pretty niche and under the radar enough to kind of be considered, like a Marvel independent almost. Her book is done in an anime style, and she can control wind. And Dan, you mentioned that she was introduced in Agents of Atlas. And so I picked up that trade, and then in her second set of issues, she gets joined by Iron Man. So I'm super stoked to read about that. And then, oh God, where do I start with actual independence? I recently just picked up We Only Find Them When They're Dead. I've gotten some good reviews and recommendations for that. Noctera is probably the biggest book that I've heard from my friends around the LCS. And then we got stuff like, oh God, I can't even remember. Not Somebody's Killing the Children, but I saw that, and I saw Atlantis Wasn't Built for Tourists. It's another good one that I've heard. So I can't remember all of them off the top of my head, and I don't want to waste any more time. So I'm just going to wrap this up and say that, I got a bunch of books on the docket, and I'd love to revisit this once I get a chance to read them.
Yeah, okay, I think it's I'm excited to read more of these indies than the mainstream stuff too, because I don't think it's new to me. I don't have a previous opinion. Yeah. I don't have anything about it. It's just walk in fresh. And to be honest, as somebody who's been a lifetime comic book fan, I need that right now, because everything is just so oversaturated and just not fun for me anymore. I think that's part of my burnout lately, is it's just a lot of this stuff just isn't fun to me anymore. So I think venturing into a different avenue is going to be really good.
Surprisingly, a lot of horror in this independent genre.
Yeah.
I found like 2/3 to 3/4 of the series that I've looked into are all horror. Not a bad thing. I love horror myself, but when it comes to like storylines, I like something a little bit more existential
And
and philosophical.
I had the opposite problem in the fact that I'm not a big horror reader. So going in and seeing how many of the independents were horror, or the other problem, of course, is like is Boom, IDW. It's all licensed stuff for the most part. So yes, do I love that there's this epic Power Rangers line that goes so much deeper than the series ever goes? Yes, I do. But like, I can't think of that as like a straight up independent. Um, but as I was diving into this, having only been in Colorado Springs for a year during a pandemic, I didn't have a comic book shop. So I just Googled them all and I looked at pictures of them and I was like, which has the cleanest layout? Because I'm an avid reader, saving up to own a bookstore. And I'd mentioned the first time Buck ever bought his own book last week. I told him to look at the cover, find a cover that looked interested into him, and then just read about it. One of the big things for me is always reviews. When it comes to books, I know which publishers that review books I appreciate the opinion of, and I know which authors I like and who review books often. So that's always how I do with Independence too. Is it's a interesting cover, and then a review, and then sometimes I do it just to take a quick glance. And then even there's so many like powerhouse creators who then leave Marvel and DC and then create their own titles, which that was how Image started, was all these guys going and doing their creator own. So I love Greg Rucka. So one of the indies I picked up this last week was by Greg Rucka, and it's him doing a magical detective. And I was like, okay, Greg Rucka's Stumptown was a great title, became a series. So I love Greg Rucka doing detective stuff. So I'm like, let's see how I can deal with a Greg Rucka magic. So I'm excited to dive into that one. So I mean, the nice part about this was the shop I did pick, the lady working was wonderful. She was so excited to help me. And I think that's the biggest advice I have for any local shop.
Wait, was that Stumptown the TV? That was a TV show. There's the comic of that.
Yeah, it's Omni Press. Greg Rucka created, and I love Greg Rucka so much. I don't read hardcover, and I picked up the hardcover when it first came out for Stumptown. It's a little. I mean, the series, especially for being an ABC series, was dark.
Yeah.
This is darker, and I mean, it's nice to see what Rucka can do. I think some of the stuff he was doing on Batman in the mid 2000s was like the best Batman stuff going around that time that wasn't done by Dixon. So I was excited to see Rucka. So seeing another one, I picked him up. But before I get into the one I actually read that I want to talk about, let's play some Marry Date Chill. And we have Nick Cage, Benedict Cumberbatch, and Alan Rickman. Dan, Marry Date Chill.
Oh, I'm gonna marry Alan Rickman, especially because it's very low maintenance now. Date. I'd date Nick Cage. I think it'd be fun, interesting, and magical. And he probably has an endless collection of leather I could borrow. And I would reluctantly chill with Benedict Cumberbatch just because he's such a dick as Doctor Strange that that's all I see him as now. Despite the fact that he seems like a really cool dude. But I can't get that out of my mind. So I think that'd have to be mine. I also am a big fan of Quiet, so Rickman would be perfect for me to be married to.
Do you know their connection?
I was trying to think of it. I thought I had it, but then I don't.
Tim is like really thinking about it right now.
Oh no, I'm just listening intently. Yeah, for once I don't actually know the connection. But for now I'd have to say I will I would date Nick Cage because he just seems like he'd take me on like an acid trip of a date with the way that guy moves. And I'd marry Benedict Cumberbatch. No particular reason. I just love Doctor Strange. And then Alan Rickman, I would date the shit out of him. Because I would just want our date to lie in bed as he just talked to me with that sultry voice, just soothe me to sleep. And yeah, I don't have a connection.
Okay, I would also marry Cumberbatch just because of the three, he's got the biggest like fanboy, fangirl following, and I just want them to be so jealous of me. I'm gonna date Nick Cage because the guy is crazy and just like spends money on a whim. So that would be a fun little date. And I'm just gonna chill with Alan Rickman. Before he passed, he was such a loving family man that I would never want to get in between that. And their connection is they have all played some sort of wizard before. Cumberbatch is Doctor
Oh.
Strange, Alan Rickman is Snape, and then of course Nick Cage in The Sorcerer's Apprentice, where he plays whatever the sorcerer's name is. As much as I love Jay Bertel, I did not see that film and never will. And that goes into the book I picked up and read is Curse Words. It is written by Charles Soule, who wrote on a Star Wars title as well as Daredevil. And it's just this insane fantasy look. It's a wizard in modern times who's come from another realm to destroy the world and then falls in love with the world and starts granting wishes. But he doesn't quite have an understanding of how this world works or how his powers work. And it's absurd. One of the reviews talked about how it flips fantasy tropes on their head, and it's true. It's a fun title. There's not anything too much deep. There's a koala bear that talks that is a sidekick, and so
That's adorable.
Image as it's listed as a fantasy, humor, and koalas for its categories, and that sold me. But I mostly picked it because I know how much Dan loves wizards. So when I saw a wizard on the cover of this, I was like, well, I'm picking that. And also, Curse Words is just such a good name.
Yeah, I like that.
The art is clean and colorful. Ryan Brown is the artist on that.
Oh, nice.
And it's fun. It's just a really, really good title. I can't recommend it enough. I think it's probably the exact opposite in art of Department of Truth in the fact that it's clean, it's colorful, but there's a little edge to it. Characters are so well defined in there, but the story is similar in the fact that I'm not quite sure where it's going. Like the story should be pretty straightforward, but the plot keeps getting flipped on its head at the same time. So I'm curious where it's going to go. I am really engaged. I picked up a couple other titles this past week while I was out, but I will save them for future editions as reading recommendations if I like them. But I did want to talk about indies just for those who haven't read graphic novels and are listening to us talk about this and wondering. I mentioned Bendis. I thought did some of like the best Marvel stuff with the crossover events, and I think his series Powers is just phenomenal. And this is another one I have hardcover copies of, and mostly because I picked them up used at a store I used to work at. So when they came in for $4 a piece, there was no way I was going to pass up books 1 through 7 in hardcover. So now I have to get the whole series in hardcover. And then I think one of the ultimate indie stories would be The Tick.
I love the shirt too.
And yeah. I am rocking the Tick shirt to go with it. I mean, it's easy to forget that The Tick is an independent comic. It started as the actual mascot for New England Comics and then was turned into a comic book and then became an animated series and 2 different live action series. It was just a merchandise grab bag. And what a great Ben Udlin also worked on Supernatural, among other things. So the guy's carved quite a career from himself. And he kind of went the reverse of a Rucka or a Bendis, and the fact that he started super small and then went mainstream. Granted, more mainstream in television, but if you're going to talk like the ultimate success story, it was a quick couple panel comic book written for a mascot of a comic book shop that turned into a global phenomenon. So plus, if you want something that's smart and filled with satire and makes fun of tropes. The Tick was doing it long before The Boys was doing it. I mean, it's just this brilliant, brilliant look.
You know,
It was
I
fun.
kind of forget about the writing in the Tick because I got so used to the the TV show that we had years ago and the cartoon that I actually forgot how great of a read the Tick was.
Yeah, it's such a great read. Just in the fact that the Tick is nigh invulnerable. Like what a silly yet small, brilliant detail to make.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you rewatch the cartoon recently, the writing is brilliant in the cartoon as well, but in a different way. And then the two live action series, my problem with the Amazon one was there were a lot of lines in the first couple episodes of the Amazon one that were repurposed from the Fox live action series.
Yeah.
And they kind of like tweaked the different context, but still, like, all were so good. Such clever dialogue in any form of the Tick. I'll never recommend the Tick highly enough because it's brilliant and genre defining while changing at the same time. So
I actually think about you every time I look at my Tick Funko Pop.
I think of me every time I look at my Tick Funko Pop. But yeah, while we're talking indies, I mean, I have a couple others that I'll save for read recommendations. One I was excited to see is still doing trades because it was really fun, but I didn't think had legs. So the fact that I read it 7 years ago and I saw a new trade for it the other day, I was like, oh, it looks like I'm doing a deep dive on that. So it was just really nice to get into a local comic book shop. I think I probably found my new shop on my first go around, but I do want to give the others a chance and see what they're like. But to go in, be greeted so wonderfully by the lady working there, and to have the other 4 or 5 people who came behind me also greeted that same way and have such great conversations with her, I was like, okay, clean layout, friendly staff. I know there's always, anytime there's a gateway to any type of subculture, you get those assholes. And
Yeah.
I think that's a huge no-no. Folks, if you ever walk into any type of store and someone is being a gatekeeping asshole, walk out. Do not give them your money. There are plenty of wonderful people in all communities that want to take your money and be helpful. So
What was the name of this shop?
this shop was Muse Comics and Games,
Nice.
which good title. It had the best name as well as it looked like the cleanest outlooks. So I was sold before going in, and more so. It's always nice to get a wonderful experience, especially in a pandemic. So,
And you know what, Greg? Now that you mentioned them and gave them a shout out, I'm going to buy something from their website. Support local from afar.
so supporting afar.
I'll support your local. That's awesome. I love it. That's a great experience. I mean, there's so many times like I was at the point where I used to drive to Buffalo for my comic books because there was nobody around until I found Rhinos because the owners were such dicks at so many shops and just the culture there is awful. And the shop I had gone to for years, you can't even walk in because it's like an episode of Hoarders. So once you find that shop and it fits, man, that's so awesome. I love that for you.
Yeah, the episode of Hoarders things, I've been into shops where they've just got too much, and so like the merchandise is falling on top of you. And I get it, you need to sell to pay rent, so you want to keep a little bit of everything, but I think just make it clean. Make it clean, be able to find everything you want right away. Because I think that's another form of gatekeeping is when you have to search and there's no clear order to things, you're just making it impossible to attract a new fan. And you need to get people in and you need to get them to come back. And a clean store, friendly staff. I've unfortunately gone to shops where the owners were wonderful, but like they'd aged out and their staff was assholes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I think about the Kevin Smith series about his comic book show that was on AMC, and I really enjoyed it. And those guys would play gatekeeper at times, but if you didn't know comic books and you watched that show, they wanted to welcome you into that fandom.
Yep.
And I think there's a time and place for that. Like, I'm not going to know off the top of my head when Wolverine appeared in Hulk. It doesn't affect my daily life. It's not something I eat and breathe. Don't be an asshole to me about it. Like,
Yeah. while we're on the subject, we actually, me and Jeanette actually took a weekend trip to Rhode Island to visit some family. And on our way back, we hit a trail of comic book shops, and the first one we went to, it was a sad little shop. It's the smallest room you could imagine. The guy didn't even have an office. It was just a shed of a store, and he had this. What took up the most room besides the counter was this table that was just a piece of plywood on what looked like two sawhorses, and then like my lower back was like rubbing up against it when I was trying to look at the comic racks, and he had a way too high. Like me as a 6'2" guy could barely see the new titles up at the top, and like he didn't do anything with the shop. He still had there was still like this live laugh love wallpaper just peeling off the back. But I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. He did have a couple issues of Demon Days, issue 1 and then an issue 1 variant that I ended up picking up, and I got shooting the shit with him, and we got on the subject of Peach, and I complimented her art style, especially how different it was compared to the other stuff, and he said it was a shame that she can't draw hands and feet, and that he would like her better if he could, and for those who are artistically gifted, we all know that hands and feet are some of the hardest parts of the human body to draw. And I said that to him, and his rebuttal was, not true. It's only hard if you don't understand it. Okay. All right. And I politely waited for Jeanette to finish browsing through the 50-cent bins, and then I promptly walked out of there.
And I can get over a dingy store, but if you're not the most like passionate person about it,
yeah.
I run this with my future shop. Here we're going to workshop some ideas with you guys right now. My future shop, I always think like I already own 8 bookcases. Like, why don't I just move those in there? But then I'm like, man, if I'm going to do it, why don't I just go uniform shops? But of course, that's a barrier to opening that's going to push me back further as I save up to have uniform bookshelves. So that's always one of those things. Like,
lucky for you, you happen to know somebody who can build those.
I thankfully have plenty of people that can build them. So I'm really excited. I'm just going to let everyone come stay in my shop for a weekend while they help me set up.
I fully intend to, and it'll be great to get the boxes that I'm currently storing in my shed for you out of the fucking shed. But I will hold them till the end of my life if it means getting them to your shop. So,
and I'm excited for this future day, and the fact that one day we'll be recording a podcast while I'm behind the counter actually waiting on customers.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
All right, was there anything you guys wanted to touch upon before we end for the week?
Battle of the Ballots 1996 tomorrow night. We will be dropping it Wednesday morning. Tim and I are continuing our journey through the MCU, and that will be dropping on Thursday morning. And I'm going to shout out cool points instead of Greg shouting out, because this week's newsletter was one of my favorites that I have read. Thoroughly enjoy it. And actually the subject matters are all over the place, which is one of the reasons why I enjoy cool points much more than other stuff I read and subscribe to, because I get my sports, I get my music, I get my obscure stuff, and he knows how to give shout outs like no other. So I'm shouting you out for your cool points right now, because I read this week's more than once because I enjoyed it so much. And it wasn't just on the toilet. Once it was on the couch. So keep up that cool point stuff.
You should be so lucky. And Dan, with your permission, can I mention our little chat coming up this weekend?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you a parent? Do you have a kid? Are you a kid who's a bandwagoner and is jumping on this Pokemon craze? Well, we have the video for you. I'm going to be meeting with Dan. We're going to run down just the basics of Pokemon collecting, we're talking about starter decks, Pokemon card rarity, how to store them, and if you should really even be focusing on value. All that and more coming up Monday night, Sunday, whenever he decides to upload.
Sunday will be.
Sunday fun day.
And coincidentally, that will be the last of my interview series as well. So Tim, you'll be my final guest. And it's funny because Greg was my first guest. You'll be my final guest.
This podcast booking in the interviews. Dan mentioned it already, but Cool Points newsletter, substack.com/Cool Points newsletter. Also Cool Points newsletter on Facebook to find the page there. And then last week I posted an interview with our guest from last week, Buck, where we talked about in-person concerts versus live stream concerts. A really fun conversation with a guy I've been to a few shows with. And this week I'll have one with a good friend, Jules, on why Mad Max Fury Road is the greatest movie of all time. And I'm loving just getting to talk to Jules and then about this subject. She didn't hesitate at all. This was the subject that popped up. This popped up quicker for her than Taco Bell did for Dan. So I'm really, really excited having that conversation with her tomorrow afternoon. That video will probably be up Thursday afternoon. So I'm excited. I got a couple more fun ones coming up. So really, really looking forward to that. And that can be found at Cool Points TV on YouTube. So thank you so much. Thank you guys. Enjoy a couple weeks of not discussing comic book movies. Well, at least here, you guys will still be discussing them over on Out of the Panel Comics, but
we will be wrapping up, I think, in 3 weeks total. Yeah.
Yeah, just about.
And then we'll be ready for what I'm sure will be a mindfuck in Loki. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And then
Thank you for having us as always, my friend.
Thank you
Yes,
guys.
sir.